Now it's time for the Inspiring Conference. As I said before, some of you will tackle biodiversity in different aspects during your master, but for me, and I think that for you, it's really important to have another dimension, another vision of an expert on biodiversity, and this is why Gerard is here today. So let me introduce a little bit Gerard. Of course, he has a really long CV, but I'm going to read just the most important one. He's currently, as I said before, if you remember this picture that I showed with the three main research programs that we have in CTFC, he's currently Deputy Head of Landscape Dynamic and Biodiversity Program. His research objectives are focused on the study of interactions between agriculture and farmland birds, especially in steppeland, how it pronounced, steppeland extensive farmland areas. Another main goal of his research is knowledge transfer. Again, please remember this concept today of conservation biology criteria to stakeholders, to help them to apply and implement nature conservation planning from a scientist point of view. Since 2003, Gerard and his team has developed a close relation with the Catalan regional government, dealing and giving advice to regional stakeholders. He had participated in different research projects related to biodiversity, conservation, and environmental services in agricultural systems like ERANET projects and a project founded by the Fundació General CSIC Banco Santander, which is another private company. He was involved as a lead partner in an Interreg Europe project, as you mentioned, Interreg, Live, Horizon 2020, Erasmus+. This is all this different kind of project that we face when we do research. So he was involved as a lead partner in an Interreg project called BitRex, from biodiversity data to decisions, together with 6 different European regions. The aim of the project was to enhance natural value preservation through improved regional development policies by creating and reinforcing the link between relevant biodiversity data and conservation decision-making processes. The research outputs of these and other projects are more than, of course, what we said before, more than 40 SCA papers, which is nice, co-authorship and published. And he has been also first editor of the book Ecology and Conservation of Steppeland Birds, published by Links Edition, and co-author of different chapters in different international and regional books. So as you can see, Gerard has a really extensive background in biology, in conservation of biodiversity, and of course, he is also a really good example of this connection between research and transferability. So, Gerard, thank you very much to being here with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Rosé. Bon dia. Thanks to have a chance to explain my experience, and that I think it's my first inspiring conference. So it's something, I don't know, all these things that, you know, it's not relevant. I would say that I'm the summary of all these things. I'm a passionate of biodiversity and conservation. From the very early in the beginnings, I realized that what I want to do is to work for, I'm a bird lover. I like to go birding, going to see birds and animals on the field from very early on my young years. So I study forest engineering. So I'm come from the forest management. So I have no degree on biology, but I would say that I'm not using almost nothing of my university information. So don't panic if you have to take already some decisions. You can change. So I think the best thing you can do is to find what you really feel that moves something inside you, and look for this passion, because it's in my case. So you have probably when you finish, I don't know how it goes in every country, you finish high school, then you have to decide what you go to university, what to study, but perhaps you study something that, okay, I have to study, but I don't really know if it's something that's going to like me. So don't get pushed about your background and you just think on what you want to do and what you really want to do and fight for that. And I what I want to explain here, it's my experience on this, because there has been a lot of spoilers in terms of the concepts. And it's funny because we have not talked about this gap between academia and conservation, and I will focus my speech on my experience on working in between these two sides, and what can be my recommendations, and also I will give you some examples on how to work on that. So let's move on. I would just a bit background. I think you have the audience, it's very multidisciplinary in terms of the topics you have studied. The master is also very wide in topics. So I would make some backgrounds on which is the situation in terms of, we have been all know about climate change, which is the problem about climate change, but we also have another crisis that I think it's more what we call global change. That it's something that it's a mix between climate change and changes on habitat use, changes on practices. So global change is something that puts all together a lot of more things than climate change. So inside this global change, because biodiversity is also influenced by climate change, but also by change of land uses, then we have a real crisis on terms of biodiversity loss. Here, for example, we have the cumulative extinction risk of the species, so of different groups around the world. So yeah, as you can see, we have in the last century we have a very step increase of our impact on losing of species around the world. So if we look one of these links, that it could be something that like the IPCC climate evolution, that could be something similar to biodiversity. It's what we call Living Planet Index. It's an index that measures the trends of more than 50,000 populations of more than 4,000 species that we have monitoring data around the world. So, and we put all together this information to know which are the means of this situation. And what we are seeing is that from the 1970 until 2016, we have lost 68% of the individuals of the populations of these birds around the world. So we are really in a crisis of number of species that and even individuals of animals. There are much more pigs and cows and the world than even more other wildlife mammals, for example. So it's something that it's something that is important. So we have more cattle than animals. But with this crisis that we have, there is also an increased social and political awareness of this problem, and has been changes on nature conservation. Here you have the evolution of total protected areas in the European Union from the beginning of the last 20th century. As you can see, there has been an increase. So we have, even year by year, we have an increase of protected areas as a measure that we think that it could be useful for protect all this biodiversity. For example, in the case of European Union, we have what we call Natural 2000 network. That is a network of protected areas that it's the biggest network of protected areas in the world. So it's all these blue areas around Europe. So we have a big network of Natura 2000 protected areas. We also have been working as a humans or as a different in policy. So we have been trying to get us, like in climate change, some kind of targets in terms of biodiversity and sustainable development goals, like the Aichi targets that were finished on 2020. That there were some of these Aichi targets that were focused on stopping biodiversity loss, increasing protection of nature. We also have in the sustainable development goal and sustainable development goal, the SDGs goals from now to 2030. Some of the topics are related to biodiversity. We have a very ambitious EU biodiversity strategy recently approved. So we are giving us with instruments, frameworks that to deal with this problem at more strategic level, we can say. So by the way, this research also has focus. I didn't found a more updated graph, but probably will increase. So there has been an increased interest of research and academia on number of publications, papers on scientists' journals about biodiversity and natural conservation. So there is an increase, exponential increase. So in fact, we can say that we have more knowledge. We know more things about how to protect and how to manage this. In theory, we know that. But there as we have Antonio and Jose has explained, a lot of people like me and we are aware that there's a gap between researchers, where the academia, in terms of in the context of conservation, natural conservation, the only thing or the most important thing is how many papers you publish, which is the impact factor of your publications. But these researchers normally are really disconnected to managers, that they are the ones that has the urgency, they have the biodiversity loss, so they are the ones that they have to make actions to and take decisions, because researchers, we don't take decisions on that. We can give information to the ones that they are going to take decisions. So that it's obvious, but it has not to be, because in other fields it's impossible to understand. I don't know, if you go to healthcare, it couldn't be thinkable that researchers, I don't know, they're studying things about how to I don't know, to give treatments from some kind of the disease that the society have, and then we have the solution, but then we don't give the solution to the doctors that we have in every village, and the doctors that they are the ones on the field, that they know how to do that, and how, if this person came with these symptoms, they know that they have to give this treatment with this medicine, with this I don't know, 2 weeks, 8 hours, every 8 hours, 2 pills. No, this kind of things is obvious in terms of medicine, because but in terms of conservation, it's not. So there's a gap between, and we need to build bridges to connect these two things, to the research and the management, and these bridges can. I will give you some of my reflections and opinions about on how to do that, because I decide very early in my career that I don't really, and thanks, because I was working on the CTFC, that it's this kind of center that, as Rosessa has explained, that we are very close to the real problems, and I really decide that where I feel more comfortable, and I coming back from what was my first passion when I was young, to work for biodiversity conservation. I realize that where I feel more useful is to working here in this, making the bridge, because it's where I think that my work, my hours I spend, my efforts can be more efficient in terms of what is my final goal, that it's make my contribution for increase the conservation of biodiversity in my area, my planet. I don't know, we can say on that. So that's the background. I don't know why it's okay. I will talk about how we can take good decisions in terms of conservation. So, and to understand that, I would talk about what somebody calls the conflict decision context. So we have, when we have to make a decision on terms of biodiversity conservation, we have from one side the biodiversity values of somewhere or some species or some area. We also must take into account which is the perception of the society of these values, if they are really valued or not. They know that because society is important. But also we have another sphere that we can say is that which is the support that society gives to some development projects that can impact on this biodiversity value. So at the end, we have like 3 different spheres that they have their own intersections areas, no? And when you are talking decisions about, you can find different level of conflict, how easy or difficult will be to take decision. So if we are working here where there is good values, there is important for conservation and it has support of the society for conservation, and there is no really expectations of impact in development, so the decision on what to do and the conflict will be very low. So it's something that but sometimes you can work in areas that it's fun, because there are areas that perhaps there are not too many values in terms of biodiversity, but the society give a lot of values. I don't know, I was thinking in areas, I don't know, near Barcelona, that they have I don't know, some kind of oak trees that it's very, people goes there because they go for jogging or running or with the dogs, but they're, in terms of society, they have a lot of value. But if I came as a biodiversity expert and I say, okay, these kind of trees of oak forest, we have thousands of hectares, I know, in the Pyrenees, and there is not too much interest in terms of conservation in a perspective of biodiversity. So, but sometimes this even they have no values, and there is somebody that wants to impact, they have like a social reaction against that, even they don't really have biodiversity values. And then you have the conflict that you will find, and the difficulty to take decision will increase when you are moving around here, where there is high values of biodiversity in terms of what is there. So, but if the society they don't know that, they don't really appreciate, they don't know which is the value of that, and there is a huge support of the society to develop some kind of impact project on there, then they will have a higher conflict. So you have areas with high natural value, without appreciation of the society, and high interest to develop impacting projects. So at the end, you realize that these three spheres that we are working, we normally, and it was, I think it's something that it's not, many times it does not happen, they need multidisciplinary approach. So it cannot be solved only from the ecological point of view. They need social science, they need economic science, etc. Because these are the three spheres that we are. And this, working on these three spheres, it's relevant to bring good solutions to the decision making. Because at the end, the politicians, that they are taking the decisions, they are always moving on these three spheres. They're looking what the society says, what the money capital are saying, what the laws of biodiversity conservation saying. So they are always taking decisions, when they are thinking, which is the trade-off on giving more weight to one of these or the other spheres. So it's important to work on that. So going more into detail, if we have a problem and we need to preserve, one of the main questions that normally as a researcher, as a people that my team is working very close to technicians that of the administration, that they ask us how to make conservation. We need to know where, when, and how to act are fundamental questions that we need to answer when we have to deal with conservation problems. Where and when, it's important to define spatial and temporal priorities. So not everything it's the same. It's the same. Important. We need to know where to act, where is more efficient, and what kind of actions related to determinate species or habitats are more important because the situation is worse. So we need knowledge to define these spatial and temporal priorities. But also, okay, we know that we have to act in these areas with these species. We need to know what we can do to reverse the situation. So we need to know how to implement in strategies, what kind of measures we have to conservation we have to apply. So we are focusing on the management. We have decided previously where to act. We know to know what we are going to do in the areas that we decide. But in terms of conservation, not in the academia, there is always a debate between the need of improved knowledge, because knowledge is something all times can be improved, and there is a continuous debate about between the need and the urgency to act and improve the implementation of a conservation strategy. So when somebody comes to me or people from the government say, okay, I need to do that because I have what I can do in terms of what this kind of questions, a researcher fully from the academia will say, okay, yeah, I can help you. Don't worry. I just need 10 years of working with a lot of, I need to monitor all these things, and then in 10 years or 5 years, I will give you the result. So, but doesn't work it works in the academia, but not in the real world, because the technicians or the managers that they are on the field, they are somebody up there that they are asking to give because they have pressures for other things. So they need to give a result and an answer to the question in a very short or even not long term. So it's always a balance on that. And I will think that perhaps you don't have the 100% of information. You will never have 100%, but perhaps you will have 60% of information. And if you didn't give the answer to the manager, probably this manager will go to another that he has only or she has only the 30% of information to give the decision, because he needs to give an answer because somebody has to do it. So the good thing, and it's something that it's outside you cannot do in the academia, because in the academia you have to demonstrate everything. You have a peer review on the papers. You can give, okay, with my data I can say that, okay, from black to white there is all kind of grayscale. So I can narrow your uncertainty on the decision, and there is a still gray area, but I'm not the one that I'm going to take the decision, because it's not my job. You are not paying me to take decisions, but I can say that, okay, with this uncertainty, the solution is between these two. If I have more information, I can give you more narrow confidence on my results, but this is very helpful for the manager, because they are not dealing with, okay, someone is saying, okay, this is nothing, it's not impacting, and some other side you have the colleges group, okay, that's the worst thing you can do. So there's always a gray scale, and I think science and scientific methods can help on narrowing this uncertainty to the decision maker. So, and what we need to make information, I really like this idea that there is a lot of message on this word, that without data to integrate and generate information, there is no knowledge to rely on to make wise and informed decisions. So there is some keywords for me, that it's data, that it's information, that it's knowledge. So data, it's not useful to take decisions, because data, it's in the early stage. You need to transform this data on information. And afterwards, this information, when you gather different type of information, you can have knowledge, and that's what you need, and that's what the decision maker needs to take the decision. Because if you give data, you have, I don't know, thousands of records of GPS positions of we can track animals with backpacks with GPS that we receive by GSM network. Thousands of positions of where are they moving, which are the habitats they use. So I cannot send to the decision maker a database with hundreds of thousands of GPS positions. That's what these animals need. So I need to transform this data on something that is closer to the decision. So it's important to keep in mind on that. So there's a biodiversity data flow and a value of change. So first, of course, you need data. It's a baseline. The raw data, it's important. You have, and there's a work on that. You have to collect and record data, and there is you have to translate, and then you have to gather all this information. You have to put it. Sometimes you need to put together different sources of data from different groups of biodiversity, from different teams, people working on flora from one university, people working from birds in other part, ecosystem service. At the end, you have a lot of different sources and different way of how this data it's taken. So you need to integrate. So then you have the analysis and information, and then at the end, it's when you can make policy and decision making. So, which is the context that we are moving? It's true, from the side of biodiversity information does not stop increasing. We know much things than 10 years ago. So there's an increasing information on biodiversity. There is multiple information sources. And one thing that is completely new and from the last decades, it's that most of this information it's outside the administration, it's outside the governments. On the 15 years ago, it was I don't know if you are familiarized with the citizen science movement. What is citizen science? So there is a lot of people like me that like go to the field, and when I saw a butterfly, when I saw a bird in my holidays or in weekend when I was walking, there is a lot of initiative that you can upload all this information on platforms, so and you can participate, and it's there is hundreds, thousands of volunteers that they are collecting biodiversity data around the world. I don't know if something is from here, from the UK, from the England, or so. I don't know. There is in England. It's an example. The Royal Protection Society of Birds, the RSPB. It has that in England. England, they have more than 1 million of how you say socios members. So there's thousands of people they like to go to the field and to the nature and looking for birds and mammals and butterflies. So and there is an increase on that. So and this information sometimes came from the NGOs and they are not in the context of the administration. And of course also we have that the conservation challenges are getting bigger. So despite we have more information, we have more challenges. In the terms of the decisions, we have the responsibility to be efficient and make good decisions. It's something that I would say that all politicians take into account when they are doing things. So be efficient and make good decisions as good as they could. And we need the best possible information to make decisions that sometimes are not perfect, but we need when you work on ecology, it's not like engineering. It's not like ecology and nature. There are a lot of factors that you cannot control. So most of the time you don't have 100% certainty of what you are saying because it's something very dynamic and there is a lot of factors in. I don't know. I would say that in engineering, they know exactly which is the way they can this roof can support, because you have really good calculations on the durability of this. But in nature, everything, there are a lot of interactions, there are a lot of things that you cannot control. So you just, when you are studying, you are just trying to find about patterns, even on birds or animals. When you track animals, and they have personalities. And there's a huge work on that. On different individuals of the same species, they have personalities like us. The ones they really like to go to fit more in one thing, and the others like to fit on the other thing. So even on that, it's difficult to give general rules for the animals because there are some kind of, I will not say personalities in the term of emotions, but I would say in how they use and they have really adaptabilities on to the change. They're individuals that can adapt more than others in a population to some change. So, and take into account all this variability, it's very difficult. So also there is an increase of social and legal requirements I explained before, to stop the loss of biodiversity, but also there is a increase of development and conflict resolution challenges in some of the project of what we want to do in our landscapes. And of course, there is a lack of enough funds for biodiversity conservation. So we need for sure a prioritization. Probably we will not be able to save everything everywhere. So we will need to apply some kind of prioritization, assuming that we are going to lose something somewhere. But at the end, what we are looking for is we are looking for the viability of the populations, not for the survival of the individuals. That's very important. So thinking at the end, what is our role? It's that we want to have viable populations of the species. And for that, perhaps we can lose some individuals of the population of some species if the population is viable. So we need to prioritize. So the challenge is to reduce the gap between providers of biodiversity data and information and the decision makers. As I told you in advance, biodiversity raw data is most of the time not very useful for solving problems. We need to generate products close to decision. And sometimes up-to-date information flows are not often created. I cannot follow what all research is publishing about biodiversity conservation, and I'm in between. I'm working in this area. Imagine a technician that is here in the administration. It's impossible that he can follow all the papers that are producing all the researchers and to know. So there is the need. We need to create flows on that. So, going to the detail, the expression of information needs or requirements by decision making is a vital stage. A bad expression of what we need can mean provision of incorrect data or information and may affect what we are going to do. So it's important to discuss very early in this stage in the process. So we need to know what will be the data and information we use for. And it's not always easy when you are talking. Let's see an example on how to use complex data to create a new product close to decisions. So here we have an example of a project we developed for the regional government. So we develop a high-resolution map for impact assessment of wind farms to birds. There is an increasing of wind farms on the landscape, and one of the impact we have on biodiversity is that some of the birds they just shock and impact with the windmills, so they are dying. Raptors mainly, bats, and all these things. But a lot of species of birds can just die because they are just impacting with the. So the objective that we have is to have a potential map of this, where to implement these wind farms in relation to bird communities. So we prepare a vulnerability index that integrates information on the potential impact of wind farms on different species and create a map risk of affections. So the final objective of these maps was to create an instrument to support the environmental assessments. So for that, we take into account the species characteristics, more than 200 species, where we establish, perhaps sometimes with expert opinion, we don't have information for all the species about which is the collision risk with windmills of each species, which is the sensitivity to habitat alteration derived from the wind farms, and which is a threat of status of the species, if the species is endangered or not. So at the end, we have create an index of a species of vulnerability taking into account all these topics. So then we need to know where the species, all these 200 species. So we have to generate continuous maps from this great data. Most of the time we only have observations, but if we want to planify, we need to have some kind of information of the potential distribution of the species continuous on the landscape. So what we work with is with the species distribution models. That is something, it's this kind of research things that are very useful for decisions. How it goes, these species distribution models, mainly what we use, it's biological data. We have records, observations of one species, but this information is not continuous. So we have just observations. What we do that is to create a model that relates where we have seen these species with environmental data. I will not go into deeply, but what we create is we have continuous data about environmental data, land use, climate, orography, a lot of things. And then we create these relations. And what it gives to us is, okay, I didn't go here, but I know where this bird is present. There is a relation between environmental variables. So what can I do is to project outside areas that I have not been, which is the probability of the presence of the species, taking into account which are the variables. So give us a different maps. So we can generate different species distribution maps. And what we really do at the end is integrate the index of vulnerability with these distributions to have only one map of integrate vulnerability map. These maps are the results of a very complex things of work and data of 200 species models. At the end, what we get is this kind of maps where distributions between breeding season and winter can be different. So we have a global map of vulnerability that integrates all this information. Then, of course, not all Catalonia will be available for wind farms, so we generate where the wind is enough to be a wind farms. So at the end, what we get is this kind of maps that you have integrate risk, and then you can even know these black dots are all the windmills that they are working, or even if you want to that, and you can see which is the potential impact of the position of these wind farms in terms of, because if you are in a red area, then we will have more risk to impact to birds than if you are in a blue area, which is the strong of this approach. It's easy to use and interpret by managers and developers. Okay, red, bad, blue, easy. Based on scientific data, integrate a lot of information. I don't explain how it's done. One person that the doctor, going back to the example of the doctor, when you go to the doctor and he's in your home and okay, you have I don't know, diabetes, the doctor, they don't really need to know which is the exact formula of the medicine and everything. So because they need to know if with these symptoms you have to give these pills. So it's the same. You have to translate all these things, and these kind of things. It's easy because we have not explained how it's done, all this process, because probably they will not understand. So good tool for strategic planning and preliminary impact assessments. And the best thing that we think is that, okay, what we need is a cartographic tool, because at the end, which is the purpose of the question, okay, I need to know, I want to put a wind farm here. So it's something on the land, on the map. So we think at the beginning that what we need is a map to relate, because if it's close word they are using. Let's go another type of things that it's very also interesting on working on that, what we call the adaptative management in wildlife conservation. It's a concept that I think it's worth to explain. And what's the adaptative management? In wildlife conservation emerged from the people that work on wildlife conservation profession. And the objective is to search for better solutions to increasing complex conservation challenge. Why adaptative management effective process for wildlife management? Why? First, because they deal with uncertainty in the management system. And going back on the urgency, we need to act urgently. Even we don't really know exactly if what we are going to do is the best option. So, as I will explain, this it puts inside the decision the uncertainty. The good thing is that the second is that you learn from the management. You are learning during the process. It's an adaptative mechanism. So you are learning during the things. And it's important that you define the best part. The most important is that you have to have clear objective definition. Because if you don't have clear objective, you are not going to be able, if you are going to in the right way. When somebody say, okay, I have to make management and I want to preserve biodiversity. And I would say, and what does it mean? What it means? Preserve all species. As much species you have in an area is better than having, so what it means biodiversity conservation is something that it could be so obvious, but when you are dealing with that, that's not a clear objective. Preserve biodiversity. What kind of biodiversity? So if you really need to go ahead, you need to define clear objective. So on this process, the critical step is is to have a monitoring and assessment of the management intervention. That's a critical step. And sometimes we are doing things without monitoring what we are doing. And I will say to administration that monitoring of the effect of our management is not something that you are paying. It's not it's an investment to be better in the future and to do better things and to be more efficient and to take more decisions. So how it goes mainly. First, you have to define management objective. That's the first steps and probably the most difficult. Define clear objective, what you want to preserve, how, why, clear objective. Because if you don't have clear objectives, you will not know if you are going the right way. So you have to define expected results, you have to define indicators that give answer to these results, and then with the knowledge you have at this moment, you define a first design management strategy and actions. You collect all the information, and I think that it will work because I know the species, but I'm not sure. So you start working with the information you have. Perhaps it's very few, but you start working on that. So then you're acting. You're in the phase of action. So you establish a monitoring program to obtain indication of success. You implement the actions during a time. So the first actions you define in step 2. And then it comes after a time, the phase of evaluation and learning. So you evaluate the effectiveness of the first of these actions that you have defined in point 2. You report results and proposal for improvements, and you have to also review overall management plan regularly to know if perhaps the objectives you have planned are not properly defined. But the most important thing is to adjust. You have a phase from the monitoring you modify your actions based on your own results. So you can change your strategy on your actions thanks to your monitoring. And I will explain you an example on that of a stepland birds. Stepland birds, it's a group of birds that live in very semi-desertic areas, very dry areas. Here in Spain, we have the biggest populations in Europe. Some of them, they are only in Spain, and they are living mainly on these dry land areas all around Spain with cereal steppes, what we call la meseta, all this. So they are species that they are some of them globally endangered, even more than, I don't know, bears, wolves, or more iconic species. Some of them, they are, as I mentioned at the beginning, they are not valued by the society because we have a very, we can say, Euro-Siberian view of our landscapes, the mountain, the trees, and the lake and everything. So everything has to be green. These birds are living in a very dry, with sun and very agricultural landscape. So it's something that the society doesn't not give too much value on that species. So, but we have a lot of responsibility in conservation. So in fact, in Catalonia, we have been making the state of biodiversity the analysis, and this group of birds are the group of birds that are declining higher in Catalonia, even much more than the forest birds and all these things. So we have a decline on the population on that. So, and in this concept, we have a very really high conflict on society because, as I mentioned, they live in dry areas with low productivity areas, and there was a huge irrigation project to bring water to all these areas. It was an investment plan of more than 1,500 euros of investment to transform dry land areas into irrigated, where you can then start to make crops like maize, fruit, and all these things. But here, the only way you have to produce are olives or cereal, so with low productivity because you have a pluviometry of only 400 millimeters per year. So there was a huge conflict because there was a project to irrigate all these areas, and due to legislation of European concerns, at the end, all these green areas, even there are some of that they are not clear here, from different processes of ampliation, and we have to go to the Court of European Union, the ecologists groups goes to the European Union, and we have a condemnatory sentence against this project. Almost half of the project will not be irrigated. So imagine how many deception on the territory it has arrived, because they were expecting for irrigate, promise of money and all these things that well, we can see if it's true or if it's for the farmers or it will be money for the agribusiness, that they are the ones that they are really buying the land here and then. But at the end, due to our legislations, because we are in Europe, we have to preserve all these areas where all these species, and irrigation is incompatible to preserve of these species. So there was, to deal with that, the European Commission makes a huge effort to emphasize on the compensatory measures that we are going to implement. And one of the biggest one is to rent and to reach 3,400 hectares of fields that they are going to be managed as a fallow land. I don't know if you know what's a fallow land. Fallow land is a land that you let without crop at least 1, 2, or 3 years, and these habitats are key habitats for the survival of these species. And what it happens, most of the decline of these species is due because fallow land, with the capacity we have now with our agricultural machinery, with fertilizers, there is no sense from the economic point of view to keep fallow land. So we need to rent 3,400 hectares. So it's a huge investment of money. So one thing that we need to know is where we have to place this fallow, where we have to rent this fallow for the species, because the distribution of the species was not the same. So what we do, I will not go there. We make a work on that, and we identify at field scale level which is the potentiality for each species. And what we found is that if this identification was good, successful, because after years and after renting, making the same management, we saw that some of our species goal, the abundance we found in these rented fields was higher in the fields that we predict that they were priority for the conservation than the others that were no priority, or the priority was medium. So that was good, because we can be more efficient where we spend the money. But after, fallows can be very, very different. Not everything that is agriculturally understood as fallow is the same for bears and for farmers. All these fields are fallows, so you can have much cover, much higher, different species. Even that plowed field, it could be a fallow with no vegetation. So from agronomical point of view, those are fallows. But the perception for bears and the impact on bears are very different. Why? Because then we start to know to analyze how the management we apply on the fallows can affect two of the main effects of factors to selection of the species, that is the cover of the high. So we test with using tillage, herbicide, sowing. It's cutting the vegetation. So we make some lucerne fallows, and we understand how this management affects structures and which are the requirements of different species. There are species that need more cover, there are species that need less cover, so we need to adapt our management to the requirements of the species. This is an example, and I'm finishing. In the areas where we have managed, litter buster was a species that was declining a lot and we start managing we start managing in 2015, and in the areas where we use litter buster as a target species, and we have an increase on the population of these. So we know we are doing good things, because we have where we are managing and where we are thinking on litter buster requirements, we have an effect. In the areas that we are managing, but we decide that probably we will lose some litter busters because we were thinking to other species, we don't have any impact on the vegetation. For example, you have here an example of the area. All dots are observation of males of litter busters, and in orange are our fallows that we rent and we manage. As you can see, most of the dots are inside our fields. So we are thanks to the management that it's nothing. It has been an adaptative management, knowing how to manage and all these things. We have most of the population of this area inside in our fields. Another example is that we compare what we call our target managed fields, that the TF, these fields that we manage, with other fallows
that they are under other mechanisms like the environmental schemes or the greening compulsory measures of the farmers that they have, and we know that our follows increase the abundance of the community. So it means that this species can act as an umbrella species. So we know that taking into account all the species, we have a better response, a positive response on the overall farmland community using as an umbrella species this. Just to finish, because I'm out of time, sorry, some final recommendations about my experience on all these topics we are talking. First of all, I think it's important that you need to establish a regular dialogue between the end users and the data providers. That's clear, one of the main things. Clear, make good relations, confidence, talk, which is the objective of one of the other. Clearly define the data needs by formalizing it, including the level of precision, the degree of interpretation requested. That is also important. It's important also for the data providers that the users will inform in which context will be used this information, because then perhaps define, must clearly express the context of for what you are going to use this information I give to you, because it's something of the confidence you are going to use for something that I agree with you. You cannot use the information for other things. So it's a question of creating trust between partners. Make sure the context and demands are properly understood by the data providers. That's also an important recommendation. Periodically evaluate the process from the perspective of data providers and end users. At the end, also, I think is also very important, information users, the decision makers, must report the decision taken on what role the information generated has played. They need feedback. You need to know if you do some work and give them an inform, it's important that for me to know what's the end, what decision you have taken. You really take care about what I have say or not. So it's important that they have a feedback, because it's a way to create trust between actors. And thank you for your attention, and questions are really, really welcome.
Thank you very much, Gerard. Really, really inspiring conference. Now it's your turn, so we have 5 minutes, more or less, for Andy. Come on, questions.
Hi.
More close.
Okay. Hi, thank you for your presentation. I just want to know if you are connected with different projects about bears with the south of Spain, because there is, and from Soria and like that, because I know there are different projects very interesting. So I don't know if your project is connected.
With South Spain, you mean Andalusia or?
Yeah, for example, I'm from, my family is from Murcia, and they are working with Cernica Lopinilla.
Uh-huh.
And now they are starting with Alimoche. So they are working also with the steppe birds.
Steppe birds.
So I don't know if you have some connection.
Yeah, also the connections between but also when you work on research, the connection with the people that are working and dealing with some topics of you, it's very, very important, because at the end, a lot of time you are applying for coordinate projects and all these things. So having a good network of people to know what they are doing, which are working with you, and in the case of, I don't know if you're talking about Adenex, or I don't know, the people from, I didn't work with people in Murcia, but I work a lot of people. No, it's but of course, there are not so many people working with, in this case of Stepbird, so we can say that we know each other almost every. So and nowadays it's a huge debate about photovoltaic plants and implementation of photovoltaic plants and conservation of stepbirds, because most of this increase of renewable energies of photovoltaic where are they going? To flat areas with a lot of sun, where the land is very cheap, and those are exactly the steppe areas where these birds. And there is a huge debate on how we can implement these renewable energies that we know that it's necessary for the environment, but trying to minimize, because even for the farmers, because what they pay, the companies that they pay, even I would say even 5 or 10 times the rentability of agricultural of if you have a 1 hectare of these areas in, I don't know, in Castilla-La Mancha or somewhere, they can pay you 1,500 euros per hectare if you rent your land for photovoltaic, but it's the rentability of these areas agriculture is very low, so you can multiply. So there's a huge debate on the implementation of this conflicts between, okay, we need renewable energies, we need photovoltaic, but how we can do that without minimizing the impact on this species.
Another question here in this sector. Come on.
Gracias. At what moment do you intervene in a conflict? Is it when public administration asks for you, or social movements? How do you intervene, or what role do you take in the conflict, and at what moment?
In our case, we are not always working with conflicts, but a lot of time it comes when they have the administration, they already have a conflict, and they don't have information, they don't have knowledge, and they ask us to help them to take the decision. And normally it appears when the conflict or the decision has to be taken. So, and that's a huge difference between research and listening. In the research academia, you can make your own questions. So you are the one that decide what you want to study, but perhaps what you are going to study is nothing of interest of other people, but you can make your own decisions. When you work on administration, the difference is perhaps you are going to use the same techniques, scientist techniques, but somebody outside you is making the question. So that's a bit different. So in research, only pure research, you are making your own questions, and you are free to ask whatever you want. And when you work in this kind of transfer knowledge, is somebody is making the questions for you, and then of course you apply scientific method, but the question is given, and you have to give solution on that. And that's another point of difference on between what we call transfer knowledge and science. Even we can make in both sides, science and transfer, you apply scientific method.
Okay, Gerard, so thank you for your presentation. As an biologist, I enjoyed it a lot. But I was wondering, when you are getting this knowledge, research knowledge, how you are applying these bridges to the, for example, to the policymakers? How you are doing this? So you are contacting, for example, with public administration, you are saying to them, yes, we have this knowledge, so probably you may produce these decisions in that line, or what are you doing there?
Sometimes they ask us the question, so they are in interest, and we make, so it's a previous question on that. So, and the other thing it works, it's to make some kind of technical documents, guidelines, and all these things. And does it really works also? Something that it's digested to the technician. So there's a impressive initiative in England. It's called conservation evidence. I would really suggest you check it on the webpage. It's conservationevidence.org, I think. And it's led by a scientist, Donald Sutherland. What it's doing, it's to collect thousands of papers on journals and trying to make summaries and categorize on this. It's talking about bird conservation, about pest control, and it's making like very short summaries of the main results, and even I don't know, improving hedgerows for wildlife. No, it's one of the topics. So, and they have like summaries. You say, okay, like the 70% of the papers they say is that it's positive, 20% it's not neutral effects, and only 10% it's bad. So, and they are making this huge effort of collecting all this information, gathering and putting in a very summaries, not the paper, because nobody's going to read the paper, but just highlighting, and this kind of tools is what they really work for. And yeah, I would, if you are interested, really look for, because it's a huge effort, conservation evidence.
How do you break with the dynamic that the scientist has to publish, but the society needs another form?
How you break that? It's difficult. It's difficult because I'm lucky to be in the center. That it's something that is between both worlds. So it's. But I would say that, yeah, if you are young, you are studying your scientist career and all the things, and you really want to continue, you really have to focus on publishing papers and papers and papers. So yeah. I think most is what then after, when you get your position and you had some more stable situation, you can then be able to work in this more applied projects on all these things. But I don't know, it's not easy, because there is no clear career on that. So because on the other side you have the consultancy, environmental consultancy, that is something that it's very related, but it's not really research. You can work on there are a lot of companies that they are doing pack assessments and all these things, but it's not the same. So they are working for developers and all the things, and so there is not so many examples on that. And I think the only option is that it's something that has to be really linked to administration, as our case, or in United States you have all the USDA the USDA institutes and all the things, that they are researchers, but they are linked to the departments of forestry or agriculture, or I don't know, in Catalonia we have the IRTA, or these kind of things that are really linked and are participated by the administrations, that they are the ones that they have the power of the policies, and it depends on you go.
Yeah, and maybe from the administration should invest more in science, but also academia maybe should accept other formats, like instead of accepting just papers, also starting to open the stage for other reports. No?
Yeah. There's a crisis, there's a crisis how to evaluate science, and there is a lot of discussion, and I really agree on that, because if you are, I don't know, dealing with the bioeconomy strategy of Catalonia, that it would be that, for me it's much impact than, I don't know, I would say a nature letter, because there is but this is not, you can even lead this kind of documents, and it's not evaluated or very few evaluated compared to a nature paper, no? And that is something that it's true that in our field, in the field of, for example, of engineering or all the things, that there is a private companies that they're interested on the research, then there's a clear link, because you have output, you have patents, you have products, you have, I don't know, there's a lot of research coming from the private sector that they're interested. So yeah, I think there's a question.
Last question.
Sorry.
I was wondering if you have experienced like a situation where an institution like contact you to conduct research, and then when you have like the final outcome, they do the opposite thing, you know? Like they don't answer, they don't follow your suggestions.
It could happen, yes, because I understand, because at the beginning I give information, but I'm not taking the decision. So at the end, I can understand that a politician, when they take decision, they have to take into account a lot of other things that we are not dealing in our studies. So at the end, it's something that it's multifactorial, and yes, there is cases that they don't take attention of what we do, and sometimes yes, but that's policy, that at the end they have to make a trade-off between all the pressures we have. Thank you very much for your attention.